Okay, so now we're going to talk about an introduction to the immune system. First of all, a pathogen. A pathogen is a disease-causing microorganism. There's all sorts of different types of pathogens. We have different types of bacteria, like strep or staph infections, viruses, like influenza or human papillomavirus, protozoans, like cryptosporidium or giardia, helminths, which are the worms, like tapeworms, roundworms, flukes. And all of those pathogens are capable of causing disease in a person. An antigen is a cell surface identification molecule. I like to call it the cell's ID card. Antigens can be protein, lipid, carbohydrates, or a combination of the three, or two of the three, and they're on the surface of every cell. Whether the cell is your cell or whether the cells are from pathogens, antigens give those cells their identity. Self-antigens belong in our body. So those are the proteins, lipids, carbohydrates that are displayed on the surface of our own cells. Non-self are foreign. They do not belong in the body, and this is how our immune system recognizes them as being foreign. We have two major divisions of our immune system: innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Innate immunity is nonspecific, while adaptive is specific. So nonspecific in that innate immune cells will attack anything that's foreign. Innate is also something that we're born with, while adaptive, we are not born with it. This is developed over our lifetime. And there are several levels to our immune system. We have our first line of defense, our second line of defense, and those lie underneath our innate immune responses. And then for adaptive, we have our third line of defense. So what is the job of our immune system? Well, our immune system's job is to prevent foreign microorganisms or pathogens from entering into the body. And if they do enter, it's to prevent them from establishing themselves to cause an infection or even death. Another component of our immune system is to ensure that any foreign substances that are brought into the body and any abnormal cells, such as cancer cells, are destroyed. So in our first line of defense, we want to try to prevent microorganisms from getting into the body. So we have many barriers on the surface of our body that prevent infiltration of microorganisms. These include just having skin, low pH of the skin, and high salt concentration deter the growth of numerous microorganisms. Have you ever seen a moldy person before? No, because mold doesn't like to grow in the presence of low pH and high salt concentrations. Mucus, hair, earwax, tears and saliva. So all of those things work together to prevent microorganisms from entering the body. If the microorganism does enter the body, we have to enter into some type of localized fight. So let's say that you had your intact skin, which has its low pH and high salt, and all of a sudden you got a paper cut. Well, now you have a portal of entry for microorganisms to enter into the body. So microorganisms come in, and you stimulate your second line of defense. Second line of defense is a localized attack against those microorganisms. In the second line of defense, we have phagocytosis. So local macrophages are going to try to eat up the bacteria. We have our inflammatory response. So we're going to have inflammation in the area. Neutrophils are going to come to the area to try to help clear up the bacteria and all of the debris. And then we have numerous other components of the second line of defense that are going to be nonspecific, such as fever, complement, interferon, and other types of chemicals and components like natural killer cells are another one. And those are all nonspecific, and they're going to fight those pathogens. If the second line of defense doesn't work, and the infection becomes persistent and it lasts for a couple days, then eventually our adaptive immune system is going to be stimulated. Our adaptive immune system consists primarily of T cells and B cells with antibodies, and that resides in our lymphatic system. So in order to stimulate those cells in the lymphatic system, this has to be a pretty significant infection. Once those kind of microorganisms come in contact with cells that can stimulate your adaptive immune response, the adaptive immune response is very specific so that it will only be stimulated in the case of certain types of pathogens. So you have to find the specific T cell that can actually recognize the specific pathogen that you're under attack by as being foreign. But once you find that T cell or once you find that B cell, then it's going to be activated. You're going to have multiplication like crazy. So those cells are going to start to divide and divide and divide and divide and form this huge army of cells that are then going to go around the entire body and try to clear the entire body of that specific pathogen. If your third line of defense doesn't work, that's when patients tend to die from these types of infections. So with the antibiotics that we give and the drugs and all the supportive care, it's to try to support the functions of the immune system. But ultimately, if our immune system fails, then the patient can die of the infection. So in the innate immune system, like I talked about, natural killer cells and then phagocytic cells such as neutrophils, monocytes, macrophages. And our adaptive immune system consists of B cells. Plasma cells are B cells, but they are specialized to pump out large quantities of antibody. Memory cells, this is why we get vaccinated. Excuse me. So if we get vaccinated, we get a small component of the microorganism, or maybe it's just an antigen of the microorganism. It's something that's part of the microorganism to stimulate our immune responses. Once our immune responses are stimulated, we end up producing memory cells against that pathogen. And those memory cells can stay in the body for varying periods of time. And in the body, they're going to kind of wait until they get exposed to the exact same pathogen later on in life. So if you do get exposed to the real deal out in nature, then it will come into the body and your memory cells will be ready to clear the pathogen. So if you've ever been vaccinated against polio, that doesn't mean that polio can't enter the body. Polio can and will enter the body, but as soon as it gets in, those memory cells are going to clear it before you ever have known that you got sick. T cells, helper T cells, cytotoxic T cells, like B cells, they're going to help clear those pathogens and form a specific attack against those pathogens. And then antigen-presenting cells are going to try to wake up the T cells and B cells, and they include macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells. Hypersensitivities or immune dysfunctions involve mast cells and B cells and plasma cells. In the next section, I'm just going to talk briefly about some of these hypersensitivities.